I'll be sharing my ordeal with you, so if you have some free time, I hope you'll listen and find some relief. When I returned from a business trip and opened the front door of my home, my wife was suddenly kneeling in the hallway. "James, I've had an affair. The other man's wife found out." That was what she said. This was the end of January. It caught me completely off guard. My reaction was a dumbfounded response. "Huh?" Anyway, I said, "Let's move to the living room. This isn't the place to talk." And I noticed our child was nowhere to be seen. When I asked my wife, she said, "She's at my parents' house." My wife's parents live about a half-hour train ride away. I tried to understand what had happened and what had been going on from her explanation. I told myself I need to respond calmly and made a rule for myself that questions to my wife should be polite. Looking back, our conversation was unnatural, which only added to the stupidity. My wife was saying something in a low voice, but I couldn't hear her well. In the living room, my wife knelt again, saying, "Please forgive me," in a downtrodden voice. "I haven't heard anything yet. Such behavior won't improve my impression of you. Please sit over here." When I said this, my wife lifted her head and sat on the chair. That's when I noticed that her eyes were swollen. She must have cried her eyes out. Below is the situation of her affair being exposed to the other woman, according to my wife's explanation. "One morning when you were on your business trip, the other man's wife called my cell phone and asked to meet me for a discussion. When I took a half day off from work in the afternoon to meet her, she asked me straight up, 'You're having an affair with my husband, John, aren't you?' And I admitted yes. I have the evidence of infidelity obtained through a private investigation, and I would be asking you for damages. I would also report to your husband. James is on a business trip and cannot respond immediately. He is scheduled to return in a few days. Then I need you to contact me when your husband returns." Before contacting the other woman, I asked my wife for the rough details. "Who was the man you had an affair with?" "John. He is my former boss." Thinking, it's such a cliche, the guy is a textbook adulterer. I checked the New Year's card holder. It was there. "He came to our wedding, didn't he?" "Yes." "When did you start the affair?" "A year ago." "Was it just this past year? Could there have been something before we got married? That's my guess." "There was nothing before we got married." "I'll confirm this with the other woman. She must be questioning it too, and if the testimonies don't match, I'll check again." "I'm sorry, there was a relationship before we got married." I almost fell over. It was like a scene from a comic book. Or rather, this is getting long. I'm sorry for the poor storytelling. My wife gave me the contact information, and I had no choice but to call the other woman. "Is this Mrs. Davis? I apologize for calling so late. This is James. I am Catherine's husband." "This is Davis. Thank you for getting back to me. I'd like to set up a meeting for the four of us. James, would you be available tomorrow?" "I have work, but I can make time in the afternoon." "Great. Let's meet at San Paulo Restaurant at 3. Please pass along the invitation to your wife as well." That was the rough idea, but the actual conversation was more awkward. After I relayed the time and place of the 4-person meeting, the interrogation resumed. At the time of the affair's discovery, here's the deal. I'm 34, working for a manufacturing company. My wife is a 33-year-old civil servant. We have a 5-year-old child and have been married for 7 years, with an average sexual frequency of once a week. My wife kind of looks like a younger Meryl Streep, but not flat-chested. There's also an adult film actress that looks exactly like her, but I don't know her name. She's a different person from my wife because their body features are different. I'm not particularly good looking. People often tell me, "Your wife is a knockout. You've got yourself a better half that's out of your league," and it's like Beauty and the Beast. Moving on, I kept asking her questions. It's all I could do. "What was the cause of the affair?" I don't know." "Was it something I did?" "I don't think so." "What do you want to do now?" I don't know." "Do you plan to divorce me and marry him?" "I don't want a divorce. I don't want us to break up." "Why not? If you don't love me, there's no point in staying married, right?" "That's not true. I love you." "Then why did you have the affair? Before having an affair, you should divorce me and he should break up with his wife, don't you think?" "I don't want a divorce." "What do you want me to do?" "Do whatever you want." "If I said I want a divorce, would you agree?" "I don't want a divorce. I don't want us to break up." "What about our kid?" "He was at preschool when, during the day?" The more I ask, the more disgusting truths I hear. "Is our child really ours?" "Don't doubt it. Emma is our child." "Please let us have a DNA test. You have done things to be doubted." My wife broke down in tears. Here's what I learned from her. 1, she had an affair before we got married, but it ended when we decided to get married. 2, she rekindled her affair with her former boss when our child started preschool. 3, they use hotels and, incredibly, our own house for their trysts, for which we are still paying our mortgage. Hearing that they did it in our house, my eyes landed on the small wine cellar.
Did you drink some of them?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I thought the number of bottles seemed fewer.
Damn, I should have remembered how many bottles I had. The conversation lasted about 3 hours. I was wiped out.
I just want to take a bath and go to sleep. But after what's happened here, I don't think I can sleep here anymore. Or use the bathroom, obviously.
I decided to say, I'm leaving now, and started packing.
I'll take some clothes, a suit, toiletries, and a sleeping bag. I guess I should grab my bank book and valuables so I don't drain my savings dry. It's a pity to waste the wine. Let's pour it out before leaving. Now there must be something else to do. That other guy isn't coming back, right?
Looking back, it's what you think. This was clearly an act of madness. Somehow I had convinced myself I won't be coming back here. My wife pleads, I'm sorry, please don't leave, but I ignored her. No matter what she says, I am resolute in my silence. I don't remember what else she cried out. I packed my checkbook and valuables in a document case, a change of suit in a garment bag, and loaded them into the car. Holding 2 bottles of wine and some cheese, I got in the car. That night, I parked in a random parking lot along the highway and spent the night in the car drinking wine. Although I read it out plainly, I was definitely angry and I cried too. The next morning, I submitted a business trip report to the office and borrowed an IC recorder for an interview. In the afternoon, I took a half day off and drove to the meeting location. Catherine had already arrived. Under the daylight, her hair was messy, her complexion poor. Not that I was any better, having not showered either. We were a couple emanating an aura of poverty. At that time, Catherine was apologizing to me, but I can't recall what she was saying. The other couple arrived. The guy was a tanned, older gentleman trying to look young, but compared to me, he was undoubtedly handsome. His wife had a strong and attractive fox-like face, and judging by their bags, they seemed to be affluent. We took our seats and exchanged formal greetings along the lines of, "Sorry about my foolish wife," and "Sorry about my husband." Initially, the 2 responsible for the affair were sent to separate seats at the counter, and I started talking with the other woman. We cross-checked each other's accounts of the situation, confirmed any discrepancies, and discussed how to move forward.
We haven't decided yet, but I think it's probably over.
We will postpone our divorce until next year.
A pension issue, huh?
I intend to send a demand letter for damages to Mrs. James.
I will also claim damages from your husband.
I demand in writing that your wife resign.
I probably won't have the right to interfere with my wife's job anymore. Please demand as you see fit, Mrs.
were among the shared words between the wronged parties. Next, I had a face-to-face meeting with the man, while the other woman and Catherine went to separate seats. The man suddenly prostrated himself.
Again, huh?
I sighed and told him to lift his head so I could hear his side of the story. After that, we had a 4-way meeting. We heard from those involved about how they came to commit adultery. Partway through, Catherine started crying and couldn't say anything. She was just gasping for breath, and the man did most of the talking.
I wonder if our seat is the center of attention from the other leisurely ladies at this restaurant in the middle of a weekday, was what crossed my mind.
That's not good, because it's a post-fact report, the tension is less and seems like someone else's problem. The real thrill of real-time progression is the direct transmission of frantic and shaken behavior. Around 2 hours later, the 4-way meeting was over, with the other couple making their exit.
I haven't eaten anything since last night's cheese,
I remembered, and ordered a full meal. Catherine, my wife, was still sobbing at my side.
You can go home first. Thanks for your time,
I said. While slurping up my spaghetti, I forced it down with water and then spoke with my wife. Please come home. I'll head to my folks' place and leave our house empty.
That's the place you did it, right? Disgusting,
I said, and just then, my stomach churned and I vomited. I tried to cover my mouth, but I couldn't make it in time, and vomit splashed onto the table like a fountain. My sincerest apologies to the customers and staff around me. Catherine let out a silly little eek and started crying again. I rushed out of the restaurant after a quick apology to the staff, not even waiting for my change at the cashier's desk. I'm really sorry for causing such a scene. I put Catherine in the car and headed home. She kept crying, retching, and saying, "I'm sorry, it's my fault." Our conversation in the car went something like this. As far as I remember, through the exhaustion and shock.
Before we got married and over this past year, you've had your way with me. So for this last part, let me have my way.
What do you mean by the last part? I don't want this to end.
Why won't you let me have my way?
I don't want a divorce. Apart from that, you can do whatever you want.
Do you want me to keep vomiting my guts out for the rest of my life?
I'm sorry, please forgive me.
I can't keep this up.
This was followed by a ceaseless back and forth that felt like a replay of the previous night. I dropped Catherine off in front of our house saying, "Please go inside. I'll leave." That same day, I visited the cleaning services and a lawyer's office requesting a claim for compensation. I did record our four-way conversation, but there was no need to use it. That week, I spent some time at health spas and occasionally stayed at my office. Over the weekend, I was called by my father-in-law for a three-way meeting with myself, Catherine, and him at our home, where he apologized profusely. Again, another bargain, I thought, matching his apology. When I told him I was considering a divorce, Catherine burst into tears again. My father-in-law had to take her home, and I was left alone to pack up my things. After that, I started looking for a new apartment, visiting real estate agencies. On the same day, I received a call from my parents who had been contacted by my father-in-law. It took me an hour to explain the situation. My father was calm, but my mother was furious, and it was exhausting trying to calm her down. The following week, I collapsed at work. I was taken to a nearby hospital where I received an IV drip and spent the day in the hospital. According to my coworker, I fainted all of a sudden. They thought it was a comedy sketch. Somehow, the news reached Catherine's family and she came to the hospital. And then she started crying again. I was really annoyed and said, "You shouldn't have come." Well, I felt like I was just talking normally, but in reality, I was yelling. My apologies to the nurses and patients. I was emotionally unstable. Sorry about that. My superiors at work found out about my car camping and vagrant status, so I moved to the company dormitory for the time being. Events happened following the revelation. Managed to get a signed agreement and compensation from John. Sent him the receipt. Even though I set the claim high, expecting him to refuse, I was surprised when he accepted without hesitation. A few days later, my father-in-law reported the following to me. Considering the current situation where I hold Catherine's savings books, will cover Catherine's compensation payments at her parents' house for the time being. The amount was lower than what I had. I burned and handed over the images and videos of Catherine and the kids that were left on the HD. I edited and cut out scenes where I appeared. Looking back, I don't understand why I was doing such a meticulous job. Every weekend, I had meetings with Catherine. There were times when her friends were present too. There were also times when Catherine brought the kid and I just played with her. At first, Catherine only cried and then stayed silent. Even so, I finally got her to say, "If you want a divorce." Currently, we're in divorce negotiations. The proposed items for the divorce agreement are as follows. Catherine will retain custody of the kids. I will pay $300 a month for child support. Compensation and property division will offset each other, and Catherine's parents will buy our house. I realize Catherine's parents are rich. The property disposal is taking quite some time. I didn't go after the custody. Despite my big talk, I still haven't gotten a DNA test done. My feelings towards the child are, to be honest, a dilemma. I understand they're a different individual, but they are a part of Catherine. It's a hard conflict to describe. I plan to pay child support, but not see them again. I'm thinking about making a lump sum payment to sever ties. I feel sorry that I seem cold compared to other cheated husbands. As for the follow-up, whether it's a promotion or demotion, I don't know, but John was transferred. Since it was sudden, this issue was probably the cause. This information came from Davis. Catherine hasn't quit her job and is commuting from her parents' house. Nobody's living in our 1.5-year-old house at the moment, and it's under appraisal, which is a drop in the bucket. I moved into an apartment. After moving, I sold my car. Tired yet? It's not over, just a bit more. I thought about the DNA test again in case the child wasn't mine. Child support could be reduced, and I might get more compensation. Above all, I might be able to put my feelings to rest. I've been busy for 2.5 months, but when I look back, I didn't do anything significant. Once the asset appraisal of our house is done, I'll probably be officially divorced. In the end, our married life was a complete waste and fruitless. Here's to the end of our marriage. Thank you very much for putting up with my ranting. The divorce was finalized without a hitch. I had a few thoughts afterwards. First, I guess what I did right was that I didn't resort to violence and handled everything calmly. I never raised a fist to John. To be honest, I didn't even want to touch him. I've started to think that my ex-wife might fill our kids' heads with all sorts of stuff and justify herself if I don't meet her. Also, to ensure no hard feelings remain with the kids, I've begun to think it's best to go ahead with the DNA testing. Of course, the cost should be borne by my ex-wife, Catherine. It's heartbreaking because the kids aren't to blame. When my daughter asks if she can come and see me, I always find some excuse to say no. I can't face my daughter, who day by day is becoming more and more like that woman, her mother, and I'm afraid that if I let my daughter come and see me, that woman, Catherine, might come along too. I've started thinking it would be a stroke of luck if they forgot about me and moved on. I've paid a substantial amount in the property settlement, so they probably don't need a father anymore, or so I think sometimes. It's only after reaching this point that I've realized what kind of person I was. See you in the next video. Thank you for watching.